Do you have an amazing story to tell, but you're just a little bit nervous about whether people are going to want to read it, whether it's going to do well in the market, and whether you're really going to be able to accomplish this thing you've been dreaming of, a book about your life? I'm Dr. Amanda Nell Edgar, the managing editor and CEO of Page and Podium Press. And today I want to talk about the 5 things you must do before you start writing your memoir. So I teased this a little bit in the intro, that what I have found is the most common thing that holds people back from starting that memoir is they're just so worried that nobody will read it. That makes sense. I know it can feel so vulnerable to get your story out, to spend so much time and probably money to get that book in the marketplace. It would be awful to just watch that number just sit at 0 or 50 or 100. You're wanting to sell some copies of your story. After all, the point is to get it out there, right? That's why my very first tip is you've got to define your market. Define your market. So what I mean by that is whenever we think of marketing, that's down the line. I've got a video coming on that soon, but we do want to keep that in mind when you're starting. And whenever we think of marketing, all we mean is putting that product in front of the people who want it. That's the market. So when you set out to write a memoir, I want you to think about who is your market. Now, the mistake that so many people make is that they say, everybody. I think everybody could get something out of this story. And actually, probably everybody could. But what everybody won't do is spend their time and their money to read your book, right? Your market for the people who are going to purchase and read your book is a very specific subset of the general reading public. So before you start your memoir, think about who is it that I most want to reach? And here's how you can do that, is define for yourself what you want the book to do for you. Now, we at Page and Podium, we work with a lot of authors whose books have a really clear message, a really clear meaning. Usually they want to get something across either to kind of their younger self to help them along, or they want to raise awareness for a particular cause. Their goal is not simply bestseller, right? Their goal is to change the world in some particular way, whether that's changing particular people's lives, whether that's changing the way that social and political structures are set up, whether that's raising awareness to a particular charity or cause, whatever it might be. Your market is going to be nestled inside of that goal, right? So if your goal, that first goal I gave, was that you want to change particular people's lives, well, which people are those? Are you talking about single mothers? Are you talking about early career professionals? Are you talking about your kids or your grandkids? Who is it that you're talking about? That's going to help you define your market and give you a lot of really valuable information on whether or not you feel like you're going to be able to reach those folks and how much it's going to motivate you to do so. So the first one, define your market. The second thing I want you to do, and this is really closely related to market, so we can just slide right through, is I want you to choose one single theme. Now, I've got a video coming up in a couple weeks on the top mistakes that I see memoir authors make. And the number one mistake that I see is that folks just try to put everything but the kitchen sink, maybe even throw the sink in if you got it, into that memoir. So that makes sense to me, right? If you have been through, as many of our clients have, if you have been through a lot of traumatic experiences, it can be really easy to say, oh, and I've also got this thing, and this thing happened to me too, and I want to talk about this, and they're all dramatic, and you just feel that tension just ramping up. But here's the thing. Readers want to follow one story. They want one takeaway that they can use and apply to their lives. So here's what I want you to do for this one. On just a piece of scratch paper, or if you like note cards or Post-its, that can work really well. I want you to list all of the possible stories, all of the possible ideas all of the possible message takeaways, and all of the possible things that you haven't thought about that you could maybe track down, right? So maybe you have a little bit of a memory of something with your aunt and uncle. So stories, ideas, messages, and other things that you might want to track down as you start writing. All of them. You'll have a lot. It is not uncommon to have 100 note cards in front of you when you're done with this. That is okay. That probably means you've got more than one memoir, but that is okay to have all those. Lay them all out, or if it's a sheet of paper, run down that list. And what I want you to do is group like with like. So which things go together? You're going to have different clusters and different groups. Now, in the end, you may decide 2 of the clusters go together, but what I really suggest is that you choose one of those clusters and make that your theme. It's going to make it so much easier to make a cohesive memoir that really speaks to your reader if you are communicating one thing. So, second tip, make sure that you are choosing just one theme, and that's going to allow you to filter out all of that other stuff that is really, really important, but that in the context of your book, it's going to feel a little bit like noise. Now, one of the things that's going to help you filter out and figure out what the meaning of your life is, profound, I know, it's really going to help in that theme step, is my third piece of advice, and this is just from my very heart. Before you start writing a memoir, please, please speak to a mental health professional. I know in a lot of communities, this is so highly stigmatized that people just do not feel comfortable talking about therapy or seeking out a therapist or a psychologist or a psychiatrist, whoever you'd like. But the thing about writing a memoir is it is just like stirring up all of the stuff you've been through. And I know we all think if we're doing okay, we all kind of think, well, I've gotten through it. I'm all right, right? I've healed. I'll tell you, stuff will come up. I promise, stuff will come up. I see this even when I'm ghostwriting for someone and I'm sharing the drafts. They didn't even do the writing. It can sometimes be so upsetting and unsettling. And I'll have clients say, like, I cried and cried and cried. I'm going to have to take the weekend off because reliving that was just so visceral. So get a therapist, not only because a therapist is going to help you process and make meaning from all of those events that you want to share. And of course, if it's going to be a good memoir, you got to be able to make meaning from those experiences, right? But also because as you're writing, you're going to be so grateful that you have a professional person to help you work through all that stirred up junk from your past. Somebody that knows you already because you started going to them, right, before you started your memoir. But also somebody who is just really in a position to help make sure that you have the softest possible landing. And it really is going to make your memoir better because a therapist is going to catch all those weird little things we tell ourselves that aren't really true, things that where we put ourselves down or we, blame ourselves for the things that happen. They're going to help catch those thoughts, and I promise it's going to make your book so much more valuable for your readers. So please make sure before you start your memoir that you have somebody to talk to. Fourth, big number 4, what I would suggest is that you put together a preliminary pitch. Now, I put this at number 4 on purpose because by this point you will already worked through your market, you have worked through your main theme, and you have made sure that you have somebody to talk to think about the deeper meaning and the larger meaning and make sure that you are interpreting all of your memories in a way that's going to make a really, really good book. So then the next thing we've got to do is figure out what the shape of that book is. So one thing that can be really helpful is to put together your short pitch. Now we're going to do what's called a publisher's marketplace. That's the industry site where all of the big deals get circulated. We're going to put together a publisher's marketplace pitch. So that has a very particular format. what you're going to start with is whatever the reason that you are particularly qualified to tell this story. Now, sometimes that's really, really easy. Sometimes we got to kind of think a little bit about it, right? So, of course, your life happened to you. That makes you totally credible to tell that story, right? But what else in your life, what else maybe in your training, in where you grew up, in any kind of volunteer activities that you have taken on, what else really drives your authority? Because that's one thing that if your reader can pick up on that authority from the very beginning, it's really going to help you get those ideas across. They're just going to trust you more easily. And it's going to be easier if you're trying to get a book deal. That will make it much, much easier if you've got that authority piece. But also, all the things you want to do to get your book out there, if you have thought about that authority piece, it's going to help you if you want to get your book in a local bookstore. It's going to help you with that. If you want to get some guest posts or podcast interviews, it's going to help you with that. So you might not have this, but if you can come up with something, that can be really, really helpful. So let's say that you are somebody that is a head volunteer for the local food bank. That could be really, really helpful in a lot of cases, right? If you're talking about kind of raising yourself up either from poverty or from a working class situation to maybe now you're a really successful career person, or maybe you're a doctor or social worker or something like that. How did you raise yourself up, and how can your experience as a volunteer, as a social worker, how can those experiences help tell your story? So that's the authority piece. That's what's going to go first. The second piece is just your name. You've got that, right? So this might say licensed clinical social worker, your name here. It's the first bit. The next thing is we want to put just a one word description of your book. What's the tone that you want to strike? So let's say, for example, that you are doing this book where you're talking about how you raised yourself out of poverty to become this social worker and a volunteer at a food pantry. And it's all just about kind of how you pulled yourself out of the position you were in, brought yourself up so that you can be an inspiration to the people that are reading this book, right? So if that's the case, maybe we want to say that this is a heartfelt book, right? Maybe you are somebody that likes to joke a lot and you're really lighthearted. Well, maybe we would say gritty but humorous. That's 3 words, but you get my point. We're gonna put in just a really short, like one word if you can, description of what your book is. Okay, so let's say that we're gonna have it be a heartfelt book. We're gonna try to aim for the same audiences that watch, say, Hallmark movies. These readers often tend to read authors like Jeanette Oki, some that are really kind of either Christian or kind of on the Christian edge. They really, really want those powerful, true stories. Okay, so we're gonna start our pitch. Licensed clinical social worker and food pantry volunteer, your name here, has published their heartwarming, heartfelt book, and here's your title. Now, I find that most people, by the time they come to me at least, they do often have some sense of what their title will be. I always treat it as a working title. You just never know. Sometimes people keep that title through to the end, but very often it changes. But what I want you to do, pick a title. Pick a title, put it in that slot, because I promise it's going to help how you're thinking about that book. It's going to help, first of all, it's going to make it real, but it's also going to help bring together all of those ideas and really crystallize into that book you committed to write back in when we were looking at our themes. Okay, we've got our book title. Now we've got to put our audience in here. So you're going to urge audiences, or you're going to recount to readers what? Are you going to urge readers to get more involved in their local community by sharing your story of raising yourself up from the bootstraps? Are you going to recount your experiences of struggle that took you from a working class background all the way up to where you can give back to that community you are a part of? What is the one sentence thing that you're going to do? That's the end. So your pitch is going to be real short, 50 words usually. But it might sound like licensed clinical social worker, your name here, has published a heartfelt, heartwarming book called My Trip to Volunteering at the Food Pantry. And it urges readers to get more involved in their local community by recounting the author's successes coming from poverty and lifting themselves up to become the social worker that they are. You're going to tighten it up a little bit, you're going to revise it, but here's the thing. We're not pitching this book right now to publishers. You haven't written it yet. We don't even really know what it is. So it's going to shift and it's going to change. But the reason I want you to do this exercise is that it is really going to help you hone in on so many things that you've really got to decide before you're going to be ready to even start writing that book. It's a work in progress, right? We're going to shift it and shape it, but decide before you start writing, what do you want that pitch to be? All right, and our last tip is that you need to put together a budget. Oh, this is the one everybody hates, right? Okay, so when we talk about a budget, there are a lot of things involved in publishing. I've got another video that we did last month that's going to break down every single piece of line items that you need on your budget Excel sheet. And you can even on that video in the show notes, you can download a P&L, an industry profit and loss statement. That is just basically a checklist for you to know what you need to budget. But even if you're not ready to think publishing yet, I want you to think about what kinds of support do you need? Now, as we're talking about this, I want this to be a really practical exercise. So I'm going to have you break down the support you need in 3 categories. How much time do you have? How much expertise or skill do you have? And how much money do you have? Now, those can vary hugely, right? We work with a lot of people who have no time, but they've got plenty of money. Well, that's where we come in, right? We can help you by just writing the book, get it done. There is still a highly collaborative process, of course, but the hours that it takes to write a book might not be something that you have, but maybe you have money and you would be willing to hire somebody to do that part for you. That is great. On the other hand, maybe you really need to keep your budget pretty minimal, but you've got a lot of time, right? So in that case, what I would suggest is, look around. Is there a community college in your area where you could, check in? Are there writing groups that go through that? Are there classes that you could take where you could get feedback on your work? There's lots of ways to DIY this kind of thing, but you need to be kind of honest with yourself, right? About how much time do you really have? How much money do you really have? And of course, at the center, at the intersection of those, is how much skill and expertise do you have? Now, one thing that I will shout from the rooftops, the thing you absolutely have expertise in is your story. That is one in a million. That is a one of a kind, super unique thing that you have. Embrace that. But there's a lot more that you're going to need if you're wanting to get this memoir out and you're wanting it to be good, right? If you have not taken any kind of writer's training aside from, maybe a creative writing class in high school or college, if you are not somebody that, say, reads a lot of books so that you're kind of in this industry and thinking about what kinds of things are popular, if you just really have not thought of yourself as a writer or an author, that's okay. Just know that you're going to need either more help or you're going to need more time, right? Either you're going to need the money to hire, say, a book coach or maybe a full ghostwriter if you really feel like you are just not an author, which you are, but I get that feeling that you might feel like you're not an author. You could hire somebody, right? Or on the other side, maybe you feel like you don't want to spend money, but you've got a ton of time. Here's where you can check around your community. There are all kinds of workshops and writing groups. There are all kinds of people that get together to do this. There's a huge possibility that you can find a couple of other people, either in your local community or in an online community, who are at the exact same place you are, Maybe you all can pool your resources. Maybe you can get, somebody to drop in for a VIP workshop for all of you. Maybe you can kind of take turns going out, finding the best books on writing, reading them, sharing what you learned with one another. There are lots of ways to DIY this. But if you haven't thought about how much time you have, how much skill or expertise you have, and how much money you have, then you're not going to be able to really clearly think through what you need to do to make sure you are fully supported as you write this book. And I will tell you, it's a lot of hours, so make sure you're really, really honest with yourself about that. Okay, well, I hate to say that's the 5 easy things you need to do. Because if we're honest with ourselves, that is going to take you some time. But here's the thing. Sometimes when we talk about pre-writing, we just outlining and note-taking, those things are really important. But the thing about a memoir is that is you on the page. There is no time when you're going to be more publicly vulnerable than when you put that memoir out into the world. That's a great thing. That is a brave, bold, life, world-changing thing. But it's a big thing. So let's do our prep work before we even get started. That way you're going to set yourself up for success. You're not going to get discouraged because you get started and then you don't know where to go. And ultimately, you're going to have a much better book in the end. Now, if you have started on these or if you're ready to get started on these 5 tips, please do that. And I want to share that we have one more resource that I want to offer to you that can also help go along with this video as a companion. And that is our memoir pre-writing checklist. So you can download that on our website. I'll put the link into the show notes. That is going to be at pageandpodium.com/checklist. It's pageandpodium.com/checklist. And I know that'll be so helpful just to tick off those items, really reassure yourself that you know you've done all of the background, all of the homework, so that you can have a really good experience writing this memoir. It can be just really life-changing. You'll learn so much about yourself. You'll learn so much about the world. I really encourage you to continue on this journey. And if I can help, I hope you'll reach out. Happy writing, everybody.